Thank you for everybody who is in chat right now. Thank you to everybody who is on this amazing roundtable. We're talking about queer storytelling in manga and anime today. We have a wonderful panel of guests. I'm gonna do the streamer thing and ask, hey guys, how are our volume levels right now? If I guess one of our lovely panelists could say something and see if I'm increasingly louder than you. Okay.
Oh
Were the chewy noises heard at an accurate volume level, mods? Were they?
I hope that worked.
Okay. I just got a all caps, or I just got a we got voices. So we good. We are good in
Yay.
here. So I am Kate Sanchez. I am the moderator of this panel today. If you follow me on Twitter or Instagram, you know that I really, really, really love manga and anime, and we really wanted to make sure that during Pride Month we got to talk about how it works as a wonderful storytelling medium for queer stories, a romance and otherwise. So I have this awesome panel of guests. We'll start with Dynamic Dylan26. Dylan is an amazing content creator. He does a lot of yaoi content. I see that yaoi crate shirt that you're wearing today, Dylan.
Yes, it was not planned, I swear.
And then we have Sea Monster here. Sea Monster is a content creator and strategist, but I'm not going to undersell her because she also makes webtoons.
I do. Hi, I make a webtoon called No Such Thing and another webtoon named Aram. If you guys are hanging out over on my stream, you can see a beautiful sample of Aram's artwork right over there. And if you guys want to go read it and leave a comment on how hot you think all of the characters are, because they're all gay and hot, you should do that.
And then we have Aisha, who is a content creator over at Mama Loves Manga. YouTube, Twitter's, everything's.
And also, most recently, OnlyFans. Bum, 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 bum.
I really want to go to Thirsty Thursday on OnlyFans.
Listen,
That
it's
sounds
amazing.
amazing.
I mean, Thirsty Thursday just on YouTube is lit. Just imagine how great it's going to be on OnlyFans when I have free reign and y'all are paying me.
Amazing.
That's awesome.
And finally, we have Chris Lamb, host and producer of Have You Tried Not Being a Podcast and Not Safe for Weebs?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, Kate. I'm super excited to be here to talk about horny and gay shit.
Yes.
Sorry, am I allowed to curse? I apologize.
I mean, well, we are now.
Okay. Great.
No,
Too late now. The brands won't sponsor us.
No, cursing is fine. We are going to be talking about yaoi and yuri, so obviously there's going to be some stuff we're going to talk about, guys.
Yeah.
But the first part of this panel is dedicated to Doujinshi. And I have these questions out of order. Let me get the right one up. We're going to start off with what is Doujinshi for those people in the chat who don't know. Chris, take it away.
Sure. So the way that I define doujinshi is simply fan fiction in a nutshell. The way that I would define it is like, you know, taking a pre-existing intellectual property that you didn't originally come up with and coming up with usually a manga that involves those characters in potentially a different relationship, or maybe not even a different relationship, just in a different scenario of some kind. If anyone else wants to add to that, please let me know, because it's been a while since I've actually looked up the definition.
Yeah.
My
I'd
understanding of Doujin, especially as a creator, is that it's actually just indie self-published content. So a lot of stuff falls under Doujin that is outside of the fandom realm. So you get a lot of different self-published works that all count and qualify as Doujin. They're just independently published works or self-published works more often than not. They don't necessarily have to be pornographic in nature. They don't have to be fan-based in nature. It is literally just a self-published work. So if you went to Japan and you were like, where's the doujins, they'd send you to the self-published section.
Which is really interesting because I feel like when you say doujin in the US, it's exactly what Chris said, but like usually with an M+ rating.
It's kind of interesting because you're seeing a lot of fans in the US essentially give new meanings to a lot of Japanese words. And it's not necessarily just Japanese words, but you see it happen with both Korean and Chinese language as well, where like, and you see this too with the term yaoi. So yaoi is honestly kind of dated. You don't necessarily hear it that often anymore. You still hear it, but it's not as commonly used. BL is definitely the more common term, but it's an umbrella term that just encompasses MLM content. And it also encompasses non-binary content as well. But you see a lot of people redefining it as purely an overtly sexual genre, which it is not. It just encompasses MLM. So but you see a lot of people redefining that word to suit their own niche meaning, which is sort of interesting and also a little bit, and I might be out of line for saying this because obviously I am white, but it's a little bit colonizer-y. But also like recognizes like. So it is a way of sort of Americanizing or, globalizing, I guess. Not really globalizing. It's Americanizing because you mostly see it with American fans.
Right.
Words and the words meanings that, Anyway, sorry. I like immediately made everything awkward. I'm like,
no, that's
no,
not awkward at all.
I just to give you guys a little bit of a background, I do speak Japanese fluently. I have lived in Japan and I have worked in translation services across demographics. I've also done private tours and I have also taught Japanese. So I do have reference for what I'm talking about. And also my mother and my hanmoni are Korean. So these are the backgrounds that I have. And this is my cultural frame of reference for what I'm saying. It's not just coming out of my ass.
Yes.
Well, as somebody who consistently talks out of their butt, I'm gonna
same.
But no, I think what's really important too, especially like as we get into talking about doujinshi, is one, and we'll talk about like the difference between original work, but also like the importance it does have in fan fiction for like making pairings. Because like one of the first doujins, which we'll go into our second question, which is, what's your history reading or making doujins? And my first doujin was Yuri on Ice because I was really upset that they never like officially got together. And so I hadn't even thought about going to look at doujins, and then I listened to Chris's podcast and I was like, oh yeah, doujins exist. I can go find where people have made this happen. So what is your history with reading or making doujinshi? We'll start with Dylan.
Okay. So actually mine was also a Yuri on Ice doujin as well. I went to a convention a few years ago, or maybe it was longer than that, when it first came out. And there was an artist named Mao who drew a lot of really cool art. And later on, she published her own doujin, which gave Yuri and Victor a happily ever after, essentially. And so that was my first little taste of doujin, and it was amazing. It was cool seeing something that you couldn't see within the show, I guess. So it was nice. I was one of my favorite parts of that.
How about you, Aisha?
So I fell into it. It was actually a year or two ago. Iridori Comics was looking for reviewers, and someone, like one of my manga tube acquaintances, he had tagged me in this thing. He's like, hey, this looks like something that's up your alley. I think at the time I had been doing Thirsty Thursday for a little bit, like it was new. And I was like, oh, sure. And I didn't really know, like, I think I'd heard the word kind of floating, but I didn't know anything about it. And I was just like, sure, if someone's going to give me something free to read, then yeah. And that's how I got introduced to it. And now I've also worked with them a few times for things because I love the stuff that they give us because, well, we'll get into that. But yeah, anyway. So yeah, I started by being introduced to Iridori comics.
Chris?
Yeah.
I don't have as romantic of a story. I essentially, I'm gonna be super honest, like, see, like, I wish I had like a better story, but I was literally just like a horny teenager that wanted something that wasn't quite.
That's a real story.
That's a real story.
Yeah,
like that's
like I had like this idea in my head where I was like, oh well, like it's not real people, so it's not like actual porn. Like
that is how many of people got into hentai.
Like, right, like, yeah, and so like, yeah, and I hope that we are going to be explaining the line between like hentai, dojin, and yaoi, BL, and shonen ai.
Yes.
All of those 100%. Things. Because I'm not really helping the case that like dojin is like purely like not all horny. But and I completely acknowledge that. But I mean, yeah, that's how it was for me. Like I fell onto a bunch of properties that I wanted to see the characters together. That and like there was something. I'm a very like visually stimulated person, and so like I couldn't just read it. I needed to see it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, Narusasu, who hasn't done that?
Valid.
Kakashi and Iruha, Phoenix, right? And
Edgeworth?
Yes, thank you. Sorry.
Are you telling me that's not
Phoenix,
canon? Because
Dojin.
Oh boy. I'm misreading a lot of things.
I want to see that, I will say.
I can recommend you some good stuff.
Yes, please.
Some really good stuff.
I'm hitting you up later.
And what about you, Sea Monster?
My story. Why are you? What? You know what I'm gonna say? All right. My story is probably pretty classic, early 2000s. Mukashi mukashi aru tokoro ni I was but a tiny Kodomo sea monster. And I was roaming around an anime convention back when anime conventions were basically in these dingy little garage warehouses, and they were really tiny. And there was a dude with a yaoi paddle and a megaphone screaming, "Porn! Get you gay, porn!" I was like, wow, I'm 15 and what's gay porn? Obviously, pretty self-explanatory. I was like, I walked up and, I was a tall kid. I was about the same height then as I am now, about 5'9". And I went, "Hi, I'm an adult." And they were like, "Sure, I guess." So I was like, amazing. So I rifled through the dingy long boxes full of untranslated Yu-Gi-Oh porn, and
nice.
I took home my body weight in Seto Yuki.
Nice.
That's
That's another one where you have to say, I'm
Just
pretty
bought
sure
the whole
that's
long
canon.
box. And of course my dad went, "What is that?" And I was like, "Anime."
I mean,
Not
wrong.
And then I went to the Blockbuster,
I love that so much.
rented me some Ninja Scroll, and had a great weekend.
That's awesome.
So I do think that this is a really good transition.
I feel like we're getting to know each other like really well.
Oh
like,
yeah,
so, like
I mean,
really
you can
well.
talk a lot
Yeah.
by a ship, right? Like,
Yeah.
You really can. Oh,
Also,
God.
Seto and Yugi is canon. I'm not gonna.
I
Accept
mean,
otherwise.
it has
that-
to be.
It's got to be canon. There's
Like,
nothing
yeah.
else that explains that
No.
rivalry at all.
And the number of
Right.
sexually charged stares that they throw at each other,
Can
like
we talk?
like I remember playing that game of like a drinking game in college, and like everyone was fucking hammered like at minute 10 of an episode.
Mhm.
like every time they stare at each other.
Right. Oh my god, because they gay.
They're here. They gay. They are in a long box guarded very poorly by a man with a yellow pebble.
Which brings us to like this the other question is like, because I mean, and you kind of touched on this, Chris, where it was, you know, you're a visual person, so just reading fanfic wasn't enough. Because I remember being on like the Lemon Lime forums where like that was the grading system for fanfic back in the day. But why self-publish manga instead of writing fanfic? And then you can answer this as, you know, as somebody who makes it or somebody who consumes a lot of it. Like, what is that difference for you? And then, like, do you read just the written stuff as well? And we'll start with Aisha.
So my podcast co-host is going to fight me later, but I don't really read fan fiction. I have to explain that when most of y'all were probably teenagers, I was an adult with a child and didn't have time for that. So I never really I didn't get the chance to do that. So I don't read fan fiction. And if I'm going to choose between, like, if I want to see, since we're cussing, if I want to see two people fuck, I want to see them. I want to see it. Like, I don't want to read it. Like, I want to see it. So I'm absolutely going to read Doujin, like,
Valid.
over written word. Like, sorry.
What about you, Dylan?
It's like, oh my god, I can't believe you.
No, I What about you, Dylan?
So for me, I think the reason I like Doujin more than the written word, I am also kind of a visual person. I'm an artist too, so I like seeing the art, and it inspires me to make my own art as well. So that's also why I really like manga too. Just in general, I just like art a lot. So yeah, I also think that that Doujin's really important because it's a way for artists to break out into the world and to get their stories shown, especially since it's hard to like publish something. I don't know all the intricacies of that personally, but I do know that self-publishing is an easier way to get noticed and to get your work out there. So I think that's really important.
Chris?
Yeah, I would say that I just really appreciate it as a labor of love. I don't really have much else to add besides like the visual stuff, but yeah, like just as a pure labor of love, like I think there's something really beautiful about seeing how painstakingly someone worked to evoke like the same art style to make it feel like real. But also, you know, that's not the only art that I find value in, obviously. Like, you know, I also find it really interesting to see people putting their work out there to build a name for themselves, you know, being able to not have to come up with an entire universe by themselves. And like also translating that art style into maybe something that they like more. Like I clearly remember when I was researching Cloud Zach for my podcast, like I saw this beautiful like shoujo, like 80s shoujo-esque style like drawing of, and it was where Cloud, Zach, and Sephiroth were all in a throuple living together. It was a lot.
Amazing.
Oh,
I
wow.
love
Do you have a link?
Yeah, I want to read that.
Let's see.
We need sources for
Sucker for
everything
thruples
in our
over here.
DM chat.
Yes. Yes.
I propose we keep that chat active so we can just lob content back and forth.
Yeah,
Yes.
I agree.
And what about you, Sea Monster?
So it goes into two categories. For me, I really love indie works because I like it when creators have full freedom over their story. It's the same reason why I love webtoons so much, because it just gives you that freedom to publish what you want. You know, when it comes to a lot of big six, not big six necessarily, but like big house publishers, you have to really fit into the marketable box that they need you to fit into. And you don't really get that freedom to create what you want. So I love watching people just full force go self-indulgent into their OCs and make the content that they want to make. Now, when it comes to horny content, it's about fluids. And there's just something about fluids that when it's written out and described, it just doesn't hit the same as when you can witness the fluid ooze on the page. Yes. Fluids. About fluids.
And I will say for me, one of the things that I like doing, for some of my friends who don't really know that like Doujin exists, I will take Doujin panels, safe for work ones a lot of the time, and be like, hey, look at what happened in the anime or the manga. Like, oh yeah, that's cool. I'm like, no, it's an artist replicating that style.
There's actually,
Oh my gosh.
there's somebody in the chat named Jumo who says that they love seeing different artistic takes on the same characters.
Yeah.
And I also just want to iterate that. I think that's really cool too. When the style of the artist is completely different from the fan work, but you get to see it interpreted a different way. That is really cool.
Yeah. And I do think, like, I know for me, like, seeing the different art styles really helps too, because you get to see characters, like, maybe taken to places that they haven't gone in, like, the stories, especially for, like, side characters.
Oh my god, yeah. Like, also, I'm just thinking of, like, seeing characters that, I don't know, like, are, say, in a post-apocalyptic or, like, some sort of combat scenario where they can never wear something casual. Like, it's really nice seeing someone hot like that, who's like usually in combat uniform or whatever, like in like a suit, like, oh god.
110% on that. And this brings us to our next question. Like, what's the importance of using Doujin to tell queer stories? And this can be from the fan stuff, from the original works. Why is this a space that's really conducive to that? Because, that's pretty much everything we've talked about here. You start with Dylan.
Yeah. Let's see. So why have I... Wait, sorry. Why would I recommend they get into it, you mean?
What's the importance of using Doujin to tell queer stories?
Oh, okay, yeah. So kind of what I was going off of earlier with getting your stories told out there. It's a little bit harder to get queer stories out there, I think, because I don't know, I feel like the market is more heteronormative, I feel like. So I think it's important to get these stories out there that aren't necessarily being told, and so that they can give queer voices a voice out in the world. I think that's really important.
Yeah. Asia?
I mean, honestly, same. I agree with that. I feel like there's actually, like Sea Monster was saying, like there's this freedom when you are self-published or you're an indie artist, because like not everyone is into the gay shit, and it kind of gives you the space to directly cater to a specific audience, like y'all are on the internet, y'all are on Twitter, y'all see how the gays go up for each other. Like, we're all out here and queer and supporting each other, and so much of what I have been able to read, like queer stuff that I've been able to read, has been through like indie channels and things like that. So I really think that Doujin is great for that, especially for Japanese creators, because like it just seems like for a lot of queer stories that are published by bigger publishers don't always give a lot of experience, as different experiences. It's kind of like, this is what will sell to the masses, whereas in Doujin it's like you can tell like a raw, real story, or you can do whatever and somebody is going to read it. I will read it.
I was just like, I'm actually specifically that person.
Yeah,
I will read it.
Yes.
I don't care
Right
what
here.
it is.
I don't care.
What about you, Chris?
Yeah, I don't have much to add besides, the fact that there is a degree of apprehension from both, like, the world at large in depicting those stories. Yes, things are better, but I still can intuit this sense of maybe not as many resources are put into this project potentially if it is a bigger project, or there's just a lack of competency, to be quite honest. I've seen examples recently of like, let's just revive Queer as Folk as opposed to like having a brand new IP, that type of thing. Let's bring on the same bunch of white people that made this show as opposed to like bringing on new talent, and for them to try to depict people of color or different experiences, that type of thing. But I also think that I think I might have touched on this slightly, and Sea Monster also did, but I think there's a lot of value in building a name for yourself by using an IP that you don't have to make for yourself, because I think there is already a built-in audience in a way, to be honest, right? Like the way that we're all talking about, like, of course, like this is basically a canon ship. And when there's that energy there, it's very useful to be like, okay, well, let's make that real and let's put it in front of people.
Yeah. And lastly, but not leastly, Sea Monster. That was so, I don't know why I did that. Let's not.
It's too late. It's already been done.
I will be last but not least. Fine. But I actually kind of liken it to UD on Ice is honestly a really good example of why self-published works, especially for the queer community, are so important. So UD on Ice, especially for American audiences, don't consider it explicitly gay enough. And you've actually even seen people very come out almost regressively with their lack of support of UD on Ice because it's not gay enough, which totally defeats the purpose. But UD on Ice is one of those pieces where it is absolutely coded. So just for people in the chat in general, coding from an academic standpoint notifies one of author intent. So something visually being coded, unless the author has not expressly stated so, or unless it is not obvious from the author's background, something is not coded simply because that is how you are interpreting it. The way that you interpret a work is a lens. The way that the author intends the work to be interpreted is coding. So just for edification, just because I know on Twitter and in the online space in general, these terms kind of get very convoluted. So that's just your edification for how I'm going to go into this.
I would argue that coding is definitely more obvious and readable than like
coding is definitely more obvious than interpretation. Oscar Wilde is a very good example of a classic writer who was coding for queer content and even got jailed and arrested for coding queer content. Usually content is coded because the author will face some sort of backlash, either legally or from, their societal structure for writing that work. So when you talk about queer coding, a lot of it is about, was the author queer? Was this their intent? Is it obvious? Yeah. So in Oscar Wilde's case, he coded not well because it was super obvious and he got but in UD on Ice's case, a much more modern case, it was coded. So UD on Ice was very explicitly coded for UD and Victor to be a couple. It was the creator's intent. It was the intent of the staff in the studio for them to be in a relationship. At the time that UD on Ice was released, and especially something we have to note is that Japan is not as forward as necessarily the States is. And we consider the States to be pretty, regressive in and of itself. Japan, when it comes to, being out and gay and creating openly gay content that circulates in the mass media, that's still not really a thing. It's even more difficult to get gay content to circulate there than it is here, surprisingly enough. And that's partly why the BL community, BL community and the indie publishing community in Japan is so tightly tied to its queer network and its queer support network and into its queer culture in general, is because it's still very, very repressed in Japan at this moment. And obviously, if I am incorrect, totally happy to be corrected if that is not the case, but this is just my experience. And, from what I have studied. So the queer coding in Yuri on Ice is very overt and very obvious. It's obvious that they kissed in that one scene. It's obvious that those are not friendship rings. It is very obvious that at the end they wind up together. And to be honest, Yuri on Ice, their coupling was received so well by mainstream audiences that they paved the way for more content that it paved the way for more content that is more expressly queer to be published and broadcasted in, you know, more mainstream capacities, which is really, Beauty on Ice was in some ways very much the testing ground for more mainstream gay content to circulate in Japan. And Beauty on Ice did so well that, you know, there are wedding magazines featuring the two getting married. There is, you know, special art content that was released as part of marketing campaigns for various businesses featuring Yuri and Victor walking down the aisle. It is canon that they get married. That is actually canon. They wind up together, they get married. There were a bunch of marketing promos about it because people received it.
They
so,
released rings,
well.
right? Like physical rings you could buy.
There were rings that you could buy, couples rings that featured, you know, Victor and Yuri. You know, there were matching tuxedos you could buy that were modeled off of the ones that they supposedly wore at their wedding. There were a lot of wedding promotions featuring those two, a lot, because it was just such a popular pairing that reached a wide mainstream audience. And it was all through coding, because otherwise they wouldn't have gotten it broadcast if it hadn't been coded. And that's something that I think a lot of people don't give creators enough credit for, is that it's not usually up to the creator what gets broadcast. It is up to the powers that be. And typically the powers that be are network executives and censorship boards. So in order to get around network executives and censorship boards, you have to code, which is why if a creator is coding, they are actually risking something by doing so. Yeah. And they are typically risking their jobs and their welfare in order to bring that queer content, even in that capacity, to light. And that's not something that should be minimized or discounted. The people who are the cowards are not the creators. It is executive boards and it is censorship boards who are blocking them from creating the content they want to make. Doujin and indie publishing in general is becoming more and more powerful with the advent of social media. So the more that you engage with indie creators, the more that you show executives, the more that you show censorship boards that this stuff is not only okay, but it performs well in their market demographics, the better it is, which is why with queer content, you really want to engage with the people who are already making it. You want to engage with those indie creators, retweet their work, follow it, give them comments, show people and show those executives that you will make them money, because that's ultimately the biggest thing that it comes down to. I mean, that's why with Pride, every single, you know, in June, every single corporation is like, hello, fellow homos, because they know gays will make them money, at least in June. Every other year, it hasn't quite been market tested enough. But in June, it will make them money. But that's what you got to show them. That every other time of the year, that gay content will give them gay green.
I just really wanted to say super quickly that I really liked what you said about trailblazing not being discounted, or being discounted by certain demographics, because I think it's very important to think about this dichotomy when we think about how progressive a work is or how queer affirmative it is, of the times that it exists, that it was birthed in at that time, because just something trailblazing for the time is going to seem quite regressive or not very not forward thinking a few years later, obviously. Yeah. And that context always needs to be taken into account, I think.
Yeah, context through which you are viewing your media is very important, because each generation has its own context and its own location and its own, I guess, state of, its own, I guess, civil progress for where you're headed in society. And it's honestly, when you are analyzing international media, especially when you're looking at manhwa and you're looking at, Japanese comics, or you're looking at Chinese media, it's really important to analyze that media based upon the country of origin and where they are currently in their social journey and in their journey towards equality. Because all of those things heavily impact what kind of content is being made, the way that it's being produced, and also the risk involved for creators, you know, especially when you're looking at countries that are very hostile towards, you know, LGBTQ. You know, so it's really important to put all of those factors together when you are looking and analyzing a piece of media.
Can we take a minute to stand? I'm going to stand. I feel like I'm sitting in this dream just like learning, and I'm just like so enamored. Would you and your partner like a third or fourth, because I am married, and also 2 children? Like, can you just, because I am just so impressed right now.
I do like off of that. I mean, I think one that was beautifully said, both from Chris and Sea Monster. And I think it brings us like the really important thing is like, why would you recommend people get into Doujinshi, and like where, you know, maybe list some of your faves, which was a question I had earlier on, but I decided to just barrel through, you know, give some of your recommendations, why you think people should read, and, you know, where they can find this stuff. We'll start with Dylan.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I have a few recommendations. So I had subscribed through Yaoi Crate and got a few doujins from Rotten Blossoms. So I have one. This is R18, just so you know. This is a Box of Passion. This is a Sarazan doujin that I really, really liked. If you're into R18 content, I would recommend that. Another one is that's not actually like anything to do with queer literature really, but I still like it and I want to highlight it. So there's a publisher, Glacier Bay Books will publish independent comics, and they published this one called Sleepy Child. This one is a really, really cute doujin about a cat boy who dreams of a world to escape his problems, essentially, because he has problems at home, and it's honestly really, really sweet and cute, and I would recommend it. So those are a couple of my favorites that I have to recommend. You can also check out like Rotten Blossoms, Irodori Comics is a good source for that as well. So I'd recommend those sites as well. So those are a couple of my favorites.
What about you, Aisha?
So all of my favorites are on Irodori Comics. Especially, I mean, okay, if I was going to tell people why they should read doujin, because why not? Like, don't you want to read more things than just what's available commercially? Like, I've always been that person who will read anything and everything, like from a child, you know? So like, it just seems like you'd want to expand your reading experience and read some different things. Also, I would like to say that at least the doujin that I tend to read, a lot of it features monsters. So if you're like me and you love monsters or like monster human interspecies relationships, definitely look to some doujin. My favorite artist, hands down, is Nemu. I love her work so freaking much. I'm thinking of there's one series, the first one that I read by her is called the Tanuki's, I think it's Tanuki's Bride or Bride of the Tanuki, one of those. And it's about a woman who is dating this Tanuki who like is so fine. Anyway, let me not get too carried away. But I love that series. It's so just like sexy, but also wholesome. Their relationship is so healthy and adorable, and the woman like enjoys it. She has a lot of power, and actually in all of Nemu's works, all of the women are very like powerful, and you know, their monster men simp for them, and that's really all I want, is to be simped for. So I like to read things like that. So yeah, read Nemu's work on Iridori Comics.
How about you, Chris?
I don't have too much to add to this either. I think basically, yeah, I mean, support independent artists. That's something that's very important to me. And, you know, I am definitely also the type of person, maybe it's because I went to UC Berkeley, and couldn't help but become a hipster, but I really enjoy sticking it to the man and not just consuming mainstream stuff.
Yes.
But I'm the type of person that always wants things to progress and always wants things to be forward thinking, and I often forget that those things are often found in independent comics. They're just a little bit harder to, just slightly harder to find. You just got to know where to find them. It's the internet. But yeah, and I would also say that like there's a number of artists that I follow who do have a Patreon. You know, you get a lot of good monthly stuff. And also I would say Pixiv, if you will. And I would also say, and another recommendation I would make is just like, especially if you're just first dipping your toes into doujinshi, and if it's specifically fan work doujinshi, maybe go with a property or a pairing that like you're not the most attached to, you know, because I definitely was that person that's like, wait a minute, this isn't the canon pairing. I don't understand. This is a little bit weird for me. Not sure how I feel about my favorite property being like messed with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Unless it's Bleach, in which case it's always been Ichigo and Rukia, and nothing else is canon. Like
yeah.
Or Hime Hu.
I don't know her.
Who's that?
Or Hime can catch rocks. I'm sorry.
Yes. Yes,
rocks.
Chris. Yes. Okay. Yeah, sorry. I don't like Orihime, and I know that's where I went, but like my brain is now in the I hate Orihime space. Why did Kubo do this to us?
The bitterness and like the settling. I was like, the energy changed.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm in my feels about Bleach a lot of the time.
It's okay.
What about you, Sea Monster? Especially as somebody who creates.
Okay. So the content I typically consume, I would not recommend to others because I consume a lot of advanced monster content. And that's why I put it in advanced monster content for a reason, because typically advanced monster content is a little gnarly. It's a little gross. It feeds into some things that I'm pretty sure only exist in my primal subconscious. Generally upsetting.
Links, please.
Not content that you would want to admit to consuming. I consume it in the privacy of my own head for a reason. I don't want to inflict it on anybody else. So I'm gonna give you guys other recommendations for content that I like to consume. So, which is the woo-woo content. So I'm gonna give you woo-woo recommendations. If you are just starting out with smaller indie or self-published works, I Hear the Sunspot is a great BL to start with. Yeah. Given is an amazing BL to start with. For a starter rated R BL, that's a little bit unhealthy, but overall kind of nice. All about opening up and coming to terms with yourself and your own psychoses. 10 count is great. I didn't make germophobia hot, but they did it. It's amazing. I was like, wow. Mm-hmm. I've never wanted hand sanitizer more in my life. So those are some good starters. And I think Webtoons is an amazing place for queer content. I see you in the chat, Wendy and Emily over there. Blades of Furry is a relatively new webtoon about figure skating gay furries and vampires. And they figure skate fight.
And
they have
vampires?
Figure skating cage matches.
Oh my gosh.
It is amazing. And also Everyone Hot. They also have an amazing Patreon. And then we have one of my favorites, which is Castle Swimmer. And that is about as woo-woo as it gets. It's two merboys, a shark prince, and a magical koi fish
Oh, I'm
who
already
fall in
sold.
I
love
know.
and go on
Yes.
a little magical journey and wind up back together again. And it's
That
really,
sounds
wholesome.
adorable.
really cute and amazing. And it is all of the romance and sugar that you need. Albeit, though, there is one, and it is Wendy's great because they trigger warn like anything that is even mildly perturbing. Of course, my scale for what is disturbing has been completely destroyed, but anything even mildly perturbing, Wendy's really good about warning. But there is this one horror scene that I am just so obsessed with because it's so hot and it's so eerie and upsetting, and it gave me chills. I love it so much. It's all of my dreams. But yeah, so everything but that, though, super wholesome, cute, woo-woo time. We're working through our problems and becoming better people, both for our relationship and for us as individuals. Phenomenal. Anyway, sorry, Wendy. Sorry. And also read my stuff. Read my things. My things aren't that
Yes.
disturbing. They're fine. It's got. I don't ever trigger warn. There's not even blood in mine. It's fine. It's about a throuple, a really cute throuple, and one of them just keeps reincarnating. So the other two have to keep finding him. But it's got reincarnation trope. It's got a magical death god who's really stupid. It's got a white-haired twink in it. It's got a himbo. A really nice Irish himbo is in it. Like shadow people, monsters, Big Daddy ghost hands. What is not
That's
to
all
love?
I ever need.
Literally
Oh yeah,
everything.
there's
Big
nothing
Daddy
disturbing
Ghost
about
Hands
no
is
such
what
thing.
sold me.
Oh yeah, I also have
Yep,
Mr. Sum.
me too.
I also have a businessman who can dislocate his jaw, and he has a long, freaky monster tongue.
Oh.
That definitely does not become relevant on the OnlyFans later.
That is amazing. I will
Anyway,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
please go read
this.
my stuff. Read No Such Thing. Also read Arum, because there is a very bitchy bureaucrat and a Patch Adams plague doctor, and they get along real well.
And
they do things like body snatching together. It's real wholesome.
I have read half of No Such Thing. The art is gorgeous and the story is really, really good, and y'all should go read it. So we are going to open up to questions from the chat. So drop it in chat.
Ooh.
Our mods will funnel it to us. Our first question comes from Matt Glenn. Hi, Matt. Thank you for joining. Oh, you said you were going to be here, so of course. But his question is, what's everyone reading or watching? I'm still thinking about Banana Fish, and it's been like a year since I watched it. We can start with...
wow.
let's start with Chris.
It's not so much of a question of what I am reading as much as what I'm playing right now. I'll just say that much. I don't know if I want to. Okay, I don't recommend this.
just
I'm trying to decide whether or not I want to say the titles because they're not clean, and they lean into the whole not cute for new timers. But I am closely following Miko-kun, who made the game Camp Buddy.
Yeah.
And I'm also I mean obviously I think like most people who like man on man stuff knows who Maz Jojo is, Black Monkey Pro.
Yeah.
He has a Patreon. I'm slowly making my way through full service, even though I watched everything already because I have no chill. And I'm working on getting my hands on Given, the manga version of it, because I want to support.
Oh, so good.
Yes.
So it's so good. Let's
one of my
see.
favorites.
And you probably won't get it till next year because of the printing presses, but
yeah, I'm keeping my eye on it. And I would also, I argue, I don't think I'm too far-fetched in saying that Steven Universe is basically like an Utena fantasy.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So like I'm counting that, and I'm also this is more like queer. Is it queer, Jason? No, it's. I would actually put it in the queer category. Princess Jellyfish.
Yeah.
I love that.
Absolutely fully queer. That is not queer adjacent.
Yeah, it's not adjacent.
Right.
It's queer.
There might be some hetero facing relationship, but there ain't nothing straight about it.
Right.
What
Well,
about you,
you've all
Aisha?
seen that couple that's like a head couple, but you're like,
That's me. That's me and my husband.
you're like y'all multi-sexuals, huh?
Yeah, I've seen this in the 50s. I've seen y'all in the 50s. We've seen this.
Seen you.
We've been done you.
Aisha, your turn.
So oh gosh, wait, what was the question? I was so engrossed.
Matt wants to know what everybody's reading or watching.
Oh yeah, so I am currently I'm supposed to be reading What Does the Fox Say, which is a web comic on Tappytoon. So I mentioned that I co-host two podcasts, a BL podcast and a Yuri podcast. And so for the Yuri cast, we've been doing a video a week, and which I really want to punch him in the face for tricking me into doing this. But anyway, so I've been doing a lot of reading a lot of Yuri. We recently read and talked about a couple of volumes of the Eclair series, the anthology series,
Seven
which
Seas, right?
Oh, I just read one of those this week.
Yen Press. Yeah, and that was really good. We also read and talked about the first 20 chapters of The Love Doctor on Lezen, which is one that we've both already read before. So we're like rereading it, and that has been fun. The Love Doctor is really cute. We've already talked about it. If y'all can, there will be like links or something. But yeah, as of right now, at this moment though, I have not been. I'm on vacation at my parents' house, and so other than what I have to read for like for the podcast, I am not reading. I have been hanging. I've been chilling. I've been hanging out with my brothers and stuff. So, but mostly Yuri.
And you, Dylan?
So I am actually hosting a readathon with my friends. We're doing basically an LGBT manga readathon for Pride Month. And so I've basically been reading like almost all of my backlog that's on my shelves that I've been getting through.
That's awesome.
And right now I'm reading Awkward Silence by Hinako Takenaga.
Oh.
I really like this one. It's essentially about two boys in high school. One's a baseball player. The other one has trouble like conveying emotions. He has a very deadpan face. And it's about their romance together, and this other boy, the baseball player, is like the only one who can like truly see how he's really feeling. So it's really cute. I like it. It's a little steamy, but it's good. I like that one. Yeah, I have a lot. I have a huge list. I also read one of the Eclair manga as well this week. That was really good. And then I also read Boys Run the Riot, which is amazing.
I need to get that.
It's so good. I think I have it right here too, because I just have books all around me.
I boxed up all of mine, and they're in the garage, and I don't know how I'm living right now.
Oh no!
Oh, I hate that.
Awesome.
Moving's not easy either.
And those are really good titles. Some are on my to-read list, actually. What about you, Sea Monster?
I am currently reading Boyfriends. That's my newest obsession. It is by Refrainbow over on Webtoons, and it is about a very pastel polycule between four boys in college, jock, prep, nerd, and goth. How could I forget goth? I love goth so much. But they just kind of go by their aesthetic titles, and one for that is actually so that you can sort of project yourself onto those characters, and it's really, really cute. I really love that idea because it's a way of seeing yourself in media, which is very important. And if you want more details and more background to those characters that more solidifies them as independent OCs, you can actually go to their Patreon where they characterize them a little more in depth. But in the general publication, they leave them vague on purpose so that they can kind of be a self-insert stand-in. And I think that's really cute. The relationship overall is portrayed in a really healthy, wholesome way as they kind of navigate their polyamory and also their sexualities. And it's very cute. It's very sweet. It gives you all the warm fuzzies and feelings. And I've really been enjoying it. Otherwise, I have purchased a doujin called Polaris, which is about the Crystal Exarch and the Warrior of Light.
Yes!
That's amazing.
Yes!
MMORPG Final Fantasy 14.
Hell yes.
And
That's
I
awesome.
really can't wait to read it. Well, the next volume, I have every volume.
See, I'm so glad that I get to be excited about this because I literally just like caught up and finished up until now.
Shadowbringers?
Yeah, because I started like last year-ish, and now I'm all caught up, and I'm very happy that I am.
The funny thing is now you're ahead of me because we're a few quests behind on Shadowbringers right now to finish it.
It's
so good.
so good.
I
good.
Just
and everybody's beautiful.
I just have and everyone's beautiful, and also like I mean, Love Through Time is great, and also like
so good.
Also like I'm just a simp for any story that's like these are angels but they're actually bad, like any types of those stories.
Yes.
like Bayonetta, oh my god.
Please consider reading Arum, which is a comic by both my partner and I about angels who should be good but are actually bad.
Ooh.
It's neat.
So you do have another question. I do want to do a quick shout out to Tappy Toon, Leshin, and Tapas, which is where I read all of my web comics and a lot of those self-published pieces, especially Under the Green Light, which is essentially they look like Bruce Wayne and Clark Kent, and that artist has done Clark Kent fan art, and it's a mafia man and a college student, and it's good.
Under the Green Light is amazing.
It's
and if
beautiful.
you wanted your Batman Clark ship, but you never got it, you will get it in Under the Green Light. It's so good.
Tapas in the mature section, not on the app, because they do that. But next question is question for hosts and viewers in chat. What is one story property that you would want to make a doujinshi for, assuming the time plus magically gifted drawing skills for people who don't already have them? And this will be rapid fire, so pick one. Aisha.
Oh gosh.
Oh.
Oh gosh.
Does it have to be one that doesn't exist already? Like
No, it just says what you want.
Okay. So
Okay.
I guess I've always had this idea in my head for a story that's kind of loosely based on my husband and I's like our first adventure outside of the country together. We went to Korea for our 10th anniversary back in 2016 and our 30th birthdays, and a lot of really hilarious things happened because like we studied the language for 2 years, and we thought we were going to be so good and got there, and a lot of hilarious things happened, but also a lot of great things happened. And I love like stories about established couples, especially couples in their 30s, because we don't get that a lot. So yeah, I think I would do that. Something loosely based on our travels to Korea, because it was hilarious. Like the stories.
Sea Monster.
So apart from the 2 self-published works that are already being created and the slutty vampire comic that is slowly being released on the OnlyFans, Star Trek. Well, so we've already got some content for it, which I can definitely share with the class if they would like to see it. But a Vulcan captain and an Orion medbay officer or medbay command shipped. Then they kiss.
Vulcans
cute
also
because
feel like they're perfect for like that trope of the tsundere trope where like they feel nothing and then they feel everything.
Yes, that's exactly the trope. It's like they feel nothing and then it's like, what? I have so many feelings. Why am I having trouble controlling myself? Oh no, because I'm in love. It's that. It's that, and it's my favorite thing. And I also like the pairing because it's highly repressed individual plus individual that has poor impulse control. And I love that mashup because they have so much to learn from each other. It's a little, yeah. I mean, I love that ship. I mean, and that's partly why Star Trek is great anyway, because Spock and Kirk are basically that ship, essentially. But here's the thing: Yuki just started introducing me to Star Trek, and now I've become completely fixated on it. I have to know all the lore. I have to know everything. I spend so much time on the Star Trek wiki now. And I've already asked them. I've already been like, can you draw our Star Trek pairing? I just want to see. And they're like, oh my God. Okay. Well, no, it's not. Oh my God. They're like, yeah. And then, so now we have all this art.
How about you, Dylan? What's yours?
So I have a few like OTPs that I would love to see solidified. One is what's his name? Soshi and Kazuki from Fafner, which is an older, I think it was 2005 or 6 mecha anime that I really, really loved. And the whole show is basically just them trying to save each other anyway. So it's like, there's so much like tension and gay context in it throughout the whole show. I'm sure it's out there. I just need to look for it. But so that's one that I really like. Another one is Tieria and Lock-On from Gundam 00, which that's pretty much canon already anyway. But it's kind of like it was originally he liked him, but he was oblivious and didn't like him. What's that word?
Unrequited?
Unrequired, yeah, that unrequired, yeah. So it's an unrequited love that never saw the light of day, basically, and I just would love to see it happen. So those are two of my like fandom favorites. If I could just like make up one, just off the top of my head, I am a huge fan of wrestling, and so if I could have like two crazy beefy, manly men. I don't know, I don't have any characters in mind, but like just the tension of a wrestling match turned into love. Can they have that, please? I don't know. Amazing. Maybe I'll have to write it. Yes. But I would love it. I'd love to see it. So
fully agree with it. Honestly, the section for like WWE ships, there's a lot of it. There's a lot of doujins out there, like a lot.
I'll have to look into it.
I will help you on this quest.
Yay! Yes. Thank you.
How about you, Chris?
I would squarely say, Alistair and the Warden from Dragon Age.
Ooh.
Because I'm still like, I respect the creator's choices for making certain characters straight and certain characters gay, certain characters not into men. But the fact that Alistair is funny and British, like, I can't help but want to get with him. And I don't like that I have to use a mod to get with him.
Yes.
He's British.
He's British.
What more do you need to know?
I will say mine is easy. Take every existing couple, but turn it into enemies to lovers, and then that's what I want. Because I can't.
Yes.
That's
love
where
that
I live.
trope.
I live in that like kind of problematic always, but still just really good to consume.
No, but I mean, like, it's such a good trope, though. Like, like Ken from Digimon.
Yes.
Yes. I love him.
Oh, give me a nice and dairy lead. Next question from Luran Mom Yasha. Hi, thank you for stopping by. Thank y'all for the fun panel and discussion. Have you ever enjoyed Doujin that was based on a series or ship you didn't like? Because we are running short on time really quickly.
My answer is quick, just no.
No.
I've only read mostly like original Doujin works, so
Dylan?
I can't really think of one, honestly. I haven't explored too much. I'm kind of new to it. So I don't have an answer either. I'm sorry.
Oh no, you're fine. Sea monster.
Yes. Absolutely.
Who was it?
What?
Who was it? Or was the ship?
See, the thing is it's hard to remember because there's so many ships I didn't like at first that I came to like because of a particular doujin.
Oh,
but I think
okay.
Actually, okay, Roxas Sora.
Huh.
That was one that I hated. As like I'm thinking back in the day when I was more picky and a teenager. That was one that I hated, but then I consumed one piece of fic that was so up my alley. I was like, this is actually amazing. This has a lot of merit. And I'm so sorry, Wendy. But there was a skiff and siren piece that really made me go, huh. And I hated it at first. I was like, I don't like that mashup. That mashup just doesn't make sense to me. And then I read the right content for it, and I was like, you know what? Maybe Skiff and Siren has a lot of merit to it. Maybe there is something there.
What about you, Chris?
Nowadays, I'm not nearly as picky. If somebody gives me a ship, I'm like, I can see it.
Yeah.
I can see it. Could be completely outlandish. It could be like the Allstate guy and the Samsung lady. And I would be like, I see it. I understand it. I get why you would fetishize that.
What about you, Chris?
I would say, I mean, yes, kind of. I think for me, yeah, I'm also quite like open now with like if one of them like I'm attracted to, then like, yeah, totally. Like let's go there, you know? Like I wouldn't have thought to put Ryuji and EY together from Persona 5.
Yeah.
That's not my personal choice. But it happened. I saw it and I like it. Also, I'm not a fan of, because like I actually I feel like I have such a good grasp on, not good, but like having played the original Final Fantasy VII, like I actually do have like this very justified fear of Sephiroth. And so like I never really wanted Cloud and Sephiroth together because I was like, this is like actually this is actually kind of a lot. Like actually kind of a lot. I can go, which makes me sound vanilla, which I'm not, but
it's okay. I also played the original and he was terrifying. But I wanted to fuck him.
I'm ready to get put in jail for this, but there's nothing I love more than a toxic villain ship.
Oh,
I love it so much.
Same.
It's junk
Sorry,
food.
Yep.
That
have
is
to
a
get
double
in the
quarter
mood.
pounder and a Coke slushie, my friend.
Yeah, I have to get in the right mood for it, but I can go there because I have played a certain Butler game that.
Oh God! Moving on to the next question with that.
I have read so much Emmett Selk Exarch. I understand.
I'm Jum. Okay, asked. You mentioned differences in how foreigners use terms like doujin. I was curious about the problems you've seen that cause. If you can do that in like a minute, Sea Monster.
Wait, what?
Oh, sorry. The question was, you mentioned differences in how foreigners use terms like doujin. I was curious about that and the problems you've seen that cause.
Oh, yeah. So one of the ways that I've seen problems with this caused is with the demonization of BL. So there's this assumption that I've been seeing that yaoi and BL are inherently sexualized terms. Now,
Yes.
because a lot of queer spaces are adult, and we can definitely have a whole other dissertation and thesis presentation off of that by itself. But though a lot of queer spaces are inherently adult, there isn't necessarily anything inherently sexual within these terms.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit difficult because you want to support BL and queer media because you want it to become more commonplace. So when you attach a demonization or a taboo label to it, like it's only sexualized or fetishized content, or straight women are the only people making this content for straight women, when it's actually the opposite, particularly in its country of origin, it becomes a big problem. And you do see this dispute often, and you see this dispute happen between creators and viewers a lot of times, especially like you see it, I think, mostly on Twitter. I think you see it a lot on Twitter, honestly. And you see it a lot in the webtoon space as well, where you'll see a creator refer to their work as BL, and then you'll kind of see them get dogpiled for fetishizing gay people, when a lot of times it'll turn out that that creator is queer themselves. Not all BL is fetish content. And also we're kind of misusing the term fetishize a little bit as well.
Yeah.
Content being sexual in nature does not inherently make it fetishized content. And that is an entirely different analysis and discussion on, you know, sexual content. Because sexual content is important content. And sexual content is important to a lot of human beings. Human beings, many of us, not all of us, but many of us are sexual creatures, and we come into our sexual selves. And it is important to acknowledge that. It's also important to acknowledge that in a way that is healthy. Because when you make things like sexuality a taboo, you sort of bury it. And you're burying a very important part of somebody's identity. And you're also making, you know, the way that somebody lives a very taboo thing, which is also not appropriate. It's important to acknowledge that in the Japanese language itself, all MLM content is going to kind of be under that BL umbrella and under that yaoi umbrella, but it doesn't inherently sexualize it. And the sexual content in and of itself, you don't know who created it. So there are going to be predominantly queer creators in this space. You know, there is this weird stereotype going around that it's straight women making content for straight women in the same way that straight men make lesbian content for straight men. But that's not really the case in the BL community. And it's not really the case internationally. You get a lot of queer women, you get a lot of gender questioning and non-binary people, you get a lot of trans people who find creating that content very cathartic. You have a lot of MLM just creating content for MLM. You have a wide variety of people creating queer content featuring MLM characters. I would say that honestly, I have, in the amount of time that I have spent creating BL and in the amount of time I have spent consuming BL and interacting with creators, I have never met a straight BL creator. I just have never met one. I have never met one outside of the community. And a big part of that is because these underground communities, you know, we cluster together and we stick together for safety. And especially when you're in a society that is more oppressive of the LGBT community, that is very necessary. You know, you don't have, you know, people proudly proclaiming that they're, a lot of people proudly proclaiming with their face fully visible in Japan saying, I'm a BL creator. You have a lot of artists that keep their identities very private. And there is a reason for that in a lot of ways. You know, obviously you do get people who are more open, but more often than not, you get people who are very private. Encouraging people to out themselves so that you can check if they're fetishizing or not is not appropriate, because it does in some cases compromise their safety.
Yes.
And that is true both in the States and abroad. It's just not something that you should do for safety reasons. But yeah, the assignment of BL being something that is hypersexual or taboo and having, you know, that separated in its own niche is definitely something that has created a lot of conflict. The foreigner's translation versus the actual translation. Another one that is interesting that you see a lot of debate about is the term fujoshi and fudanshi, which you see a lot of debate about. You see a lot of people who don't really understand the actual terminology of it and who've taken on a Western terminology of it. So what I feel like Fujoshi sort of become the new weeboo. So for younger people, when somebody calls themselves a Fujoshi, or when you call somebody else a Fujoshi, what you're saying is actually the original meaning of the word, which means you are a rotten woman, you are undesirable. Same with, fudanshi, rotten, undesirable, defunct in some way. It sort of in English takes on a otaku connotation, where it's like you're a weeb, you're appropriating another culture, you're fetishizing another culture, you're behaving in an inappropriate way to another culture. There's also the subcontext of racism to it. When you look at the way that English speakers are using the word fujoshi, it's interesting as an older queer person to watch that, just because I remember sort of how the word was originally used, which was by straight people to indicate that a woman is too connected to the queer community, because that was its original meaning. You have this woman who is not only supporting MLM, who might be trans or non-binary themselves, who is creating queer content for themselves and for other queer people. It makes them rotten, disgusting. They are affiliating themselves with something that is taboo. It makes them unmarriageable and nasty, and you don't want them around. And a lot of people started kind of reclaiming it and making it sort of this funny, like ironic thing, very, very similar to how queer was reclaimed in some ways. And being like, oh yeah, I'm a rotten woman, I don't really care about your expectations. And very similar to fudanshi, though fudanshi isn't as commonly used. And now you're sort of seeing it sort of flip back to its original usage, which it's interesting to watch. It is a little bit concerning to see, just because, when you remember it being used in such a nasty way that is a little bit more like a slur. I'm not saying it is equivocal to a slur, but, the way it was used is probably a little bit more like that. It feels a little uncomfy to see it used in the same way that it was originally used, as a way of othering and a way of devaluing somebody else.
Yeah, and this is something we'll get into in our next section. We're going to be talking exclusively about yaoi, yuri, shonenai, shoujoai, all of that, and diving into it. We're going to take a quick break to bring on our other panelist, and also for everybody to get water and stuff, because we've been at this for an hour and 30 minutes.
I'm gonna switch locations too.
But thank you all so much for showing up for our first part about Doujinshi. Stay in the chat. We will be right back. Yeah.